Hey guys, my name's Chris. I live in Australia, just taking a walk on the weekend, and today I want to have a more uncomfortable chat. Not excited to do this one, but it's something I think we need to have a common sense discussion about and not get heated up over it or anything. And it's an uncomfortable chat about immigration in Australia. So Australia is under strain right now. We're in a cost of living crisis, we're in a housing crisis, we're in an energy crisis. We have natural disasters occurring, we have flooding, cyclones, bushfires. It is a country under strain, but at the same time, we are seeing higher and higher levels of immigration coming through, especially over the last decade, but we're going to focus in over the last couple of years. So I just need to make it clear, guys, it's a problem with the process that the government's allowed, not with the people. I know if I was in some of these countries and Australia had such a better opportunity for myself, I would probably do the same thing in their shoes. So it's government process allowing this to happen. This is not a, hate on immigrants video. This is a, let's have a go at what the government is allowing to happen under such strain for this country right now. So where are we at with it all? So Australia's got around, 27 million people. It's a small country, you compare it across to America, compare it across to the UK. But what Australia has got for such a small amount of people is a large amount of immigration. And when we look at immigration, let's have a look at temporary visas. So we have 2.5 million temporary working visas in the country right now. 2.5 million for a population of 27 million. That means almost 10% of Australia's population is on temporary working visas, which doesn't make sense. How can you have 2.5 million people on temporary working visas in a housing crisis, in a cost of living crisis, in an energy crisis, putting more strain on the system? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous it's got to that point. About 970,000 of those temporary visas are student visas. So we've got a lot of students in Australia. In fact, for 27 million people, such a small country that Australia is, we have 17% of the world's international students in our country. Why do we have so many students coming into Australia? It's a great question. But aside from students, the total students plus all the temporary visas out there, 2.5 million people living here when the system is under strain. Now we're hearing politicians starting to talk about this. They're talking about cutting down immigration. But what they're talking about on immigration cuts is to permanent residency. Okay, so that's not temporary visas, that's permanent residency. Currently, so I think it's about 185,000 people per year we're allowed to become permanent residents in Australia through migration programs. Australia has a birth rate, it's a declining population. For each 2 people, there's 1.5 people born. So we need about 200,000 per year to balance Australia's population, keep the population the same. Currently, we're letting in about 185,000. And you're hearing our politicians talking about, we're going to cut immigration, we're going to cut immigration. They're talking about cutting permanent residency, guys. So 185,000, that's not included in the temporary visas I was talking about. They're not talking about cutting down temporary visas. In fact, they're pushing the narrative to get more and more and more people coming through on temporary visas right now. And we'll explore that just a little bit later on. So when you hear a politician, from the big parties saying we're cutting immigration, I think it was Liberal saying they want to cut down to 140,000 permanent residents. Like, well, there's 185 right now, so it's a 45,000 permanent resident cut. That's not the issue. The issue is the 2.5 million people in Australia on temporary working visas. It's too much. The system's under strain, it's too much. You need to cut that back. Not the permanent residence that's replacing our birth rate, the temporary visas that has flooded through all kinds of rorts and all kinds of scams into this country, and it's been perpetrated even further and further by current government policies. So let's start to have a look at some stuff. So let's have a look at a couple of our visa types right now. So we have, we'll have a look at your temporary working visas, your skill shortage visas the government's doing, and student visas. Now, a lot of people don't know this, and it's not exciting either. I had to look into it. I was like, that can't be right, but it is. So, do you think criminals should be allowed into Australia? If you're a criminal, should you get a visa over here? Well, the answer is yeah, you can. So Australia is getting criminals coming through on temporary working visas and student visas right now. The rules in place from our government on their policy for their visa immigration programs are that you are allowed to have been in jail, convicted of a crime, and get a visa in this country. You come across as a student, you come across as a worker, skill shortage visa, whatever you want to do, as long as you have been in jail for less than 12 months, convicted of a crime. Or if you have multiple offences, it's up to 2 years in jail as long as one sentence didn't exceed 12 months. So criminals are coming in on student visas. Criminals are coming in on permanent working visas. They're allowed to. It's fine. Part of the character assessment, do you have criminal convictions? Yes. Okay, cool. Well, was it less than 12 months? Yes. Cool. Welcome in. Welcome to Australia. Here's your visa. Happy days. So criminals are getting through because there is a loop in our visa. Or not a loop, an exploit in our visa program. Is it by design? Could be by design. But it doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean that we should be letting criminals into our country. If you've got a criminal record, you should not be allowed into Australia on a student visa or a working visa to integrate with our society. You should not be allowed around our society if you have a criminal record where you have been to jail. I'm going to tell a story. This is an observation that I had. It's from a couple of years ago, just before COVID started to kick in. I was living in Brisbane, and just down the end of my road, there was a little strip mall, had like a Domino's, Subway, a little convenience store, a bakery, but also on that strip mall, there was a cooking college. And every time I took a walk or a jog, I had Border Collie back then, I'd take my dog for walks every day and I'd go walking past it. It was never open. The cooking college was never open in the mornings and the afternoons. Of course, generally not weekends. I assumed that a college would be closed on the weekends, but it was never open. It was always packed up. There was never anyone there. And, you know, for a couple of weeks, I was like, oh, maybe it's just not classes. But, you know, as years went on, never opened, never anyone in there, never any classes running at any given point. You know, morning, afternoon, night time when I pop out for some food, never anyone there. And that was me not understanding what ghost colleges were. And a couple of years later, when I got a whiff of ghost colleges, I thought, wait, was that a ghost college in my neighbourhood? So I jumped back and did some research. I pulled up the name of that place. It is shut down now. Pulled up the name of that place, and I was like, cool. It is a cooking college to train people up in certificates for different, I guess, cooking and chef skills and stuff like that. You know, get a Cert 2, Cert 3 and whatever in food preparation. And then I looked at the parent company, and this is where I was like, oh, okay, boom, this was a ghost college. So the parent company that owned it, they were shut down by the Department of Education. They were a ghost college. By ghost college, guys, what I mean by that is it is an educational institution that no one ever attends, no one ever shows up to it, but they're signed up to it to get their visas, because they're doing a student visa, they're doing a course in Australia, lets them into the country to stay for 2 years. So they sign up to a ghost college, and it's unbelievable, I couldn't believe it. Sign up to a college and they just work for 2 years in Australia. They just work. They don't go to classes or anything like that. They don't do anything. They're not studying. They have no intention to ever step foot in the college. And the college is fine with it. They're set up that way for it to happen. They are visa farms, not colleges. And so this parent company, I had a look through and I was like, okay, what do they got? And they had institutions set up all across Australia. But interestingly, and this is where it really, really dug into me of how bad it was. I clicked a little tab saying partners. So these are businesses working with the parent company, and there was over 450 immigration businesses helping people get student visas set up in India, Nepal, Pakistan, Thailand, all around the world. Just immigration agents flooding and sending people through this educational institute saying, hey, you know, for X amount of money, what we're going to do is we're going to get you a course in Australia. You never have to show up, you're going to pass everything, they're just going to mark it off for you, say, yep, you've done it. But it's going to let you work in Australia for 2 years. It was a backdoor entry into Australia. And I was like, oh my God, 450 immigration companies around the world are flooding people across into Australia this way. And guys, this was just one company. So the Australian government is fully aware of this. They became fully aware of it and they started to shut these things down. This is hundreds of thousands of people coming through on sham student visas into the country. Hundreds of thousands. And they've shut down, I think it was 120 ghost colleges, and there's 140 more on notice of shutdown. But this was right in my face, guys. This training college, right in my face. In my neighbourhood where I lived, and I had no idea at the time. I think a lot of Australians aren't aware of them. I guess maybe have a look around your town. Do you have sham colleges? You see institutes set up, but you never see anyone stepping foot in them, you never see classes running. Could be a visa farm, guys, just flooding people into the country. Now, here's the thing. I have no problem, no issue whatsoever. No problem, no issue whatsoever with people who want to come to Australia and get a great education. And then, follow that education down, get a job in that field, go back to their own country and work that field after getting a great education here. What I do have an issue with is when people have came here on false pretenses. They've lied to us to get in the country. They're saying, I'm coming here to study. I'm coming here to study and get a great education in Australia. And then they sign up to one of these visa farms where they are fully aware when they're signing up they do not attend classes and they get everything marked off and they get to work in Australia for 2 years. They are fully aware of that and they come into the country to work, not to study. That's what I have an issue with. So eventually the government shut down ghost colleges and put a lot of them on notice saying, hey, you got to turn things around because we think you're doing the wrong thing. It looks like you're doing the wrong thing. So turn it around, show us that you aren't. The government eventually started shutting down ghost colleges. With one hand, they'll close it down. The other hand though, they start saying, hey, well, hang on guys, we're making a lot of money here, a lot of GDP. This looks great because they count money earned from immigrants working in the country as GDP. And what a government does not want in any circumstances is two negative quarters of GDP, because that constitutes a recession. So by counting immigration income, they can turn around and say, oh, hang on, this is keeping us up above that line. No recessions, even though we're in a per capita recession for the last 6-7 quarters or something like that. Our GDP is wrecked when it comes to the person, but when it comes to the overall in the government, we have immigration income from what they're earning in the country, propping it up a little bit. So once the government figured this out, they're like, okay, let's get control over this ourselves. And we're going to open up something called a skill shortage visa. We're going to list down a whole bunch of jobs that we believe we have a skill shortage for in Australia. And that way we can find immigrants from overseas to come fill these gaps in. But most importantly, we can count the income that they're earning in Australia as GDP. So there are hundreds of jobs listed up that qualify as a skill shortage in Australia. And I guess to be qualified to come across here and work one of these jobs, get a skill shortage visa to come work in Australia, you only need 1 year of experience in the field to come across to Australia, get your visa, come live over here, come work over here in a skill shortage. But of course you got all your jobs that you think of, like doctors, nurses, engineers, all that kind of stuff's all there. But in the list of hundreds, I'm just going to read a couple of these ones out. Kind of took me by surprise. So we have skill shortages there's in demand in Australia. We need this for our country to keep running. For private art teachers, cooks, dance teachers for private tuition, dog trainers, farriers, people making horseshoes. We have a skill shortage for that in Australia. Football players, Socceroos, man, they need a boost, don't they? Wow, what's going on here? This is ridiculous. Gardeners, goat farmers. We have a goat farmer shortage in Australia right now. Photographers, pastry cooks, musicians. Man, I worked as a musician. Well, not worked as a musician. I was a musician across my 20s in Australia. I tell you, man, there's not much money in Australia right now being a musician, unless you're like that top kind of 2% of musicians in Australia. There's not much money there. And you know what, I'll tell you what, if you're coming across from, say, Southeast Asia or something like that, coming through as a musician, you're not going to get on the pub circuits if you've got a thick accent and broken English. You're not going to get onto the RSL circuits and the pub circuits where you're getting, like $400, $500 as a band for a 3-4 hour set. You're not going to get them gigs, man. Just being blunt with you. They're not going to put you on the circuit. Other shortages, photographers. We have a shortage for post office managers in Australia. Australia Post is screaming for post office managers. So government's opening that up. Real estate agents. Just when you think you've heard it all, we have a shortage of real estate agents in Australia. We can't get enough of them, apparently. Recruitment consultants. Not surprised, because if we're opening up the immigration doors to all these ridiculous jobs that we're saying we have a skill shortage for, of course you're going to need more recruitment consultants to find jobs for people that are coming across. Skill shortage in traditional Chinese medicine practitioners. Don't have enough of that. And this is probably the biggest one on the list here. We have a skill shortage right now of teachers of English to speakers of other languages. So we have a shortage in people teaching people who can't speak English how to speak English in Australia. How's that? How's that? So help me understand here a little bit. What kind of skills shortage and crisis do we have when 18% of people coming into Australia right now can't speak English? What skill shortage are we solving there? What skill shortage are we solving when 7% of people who come across on these visas, for skill shortage visas, for temporary working visas, when 7% eventually over time end up as permanent residents and end up claiming unemployment benefits? When 7% claim benefits from the country in the long run when we start looking through things. How are we solving a skill shortage when the people coming through on these skill shortage visas stay here for a little bit, and then they open up the family stream visas, which different visa type again, where they're having their partners come across into Australia, their wives, their kids, their mums, their dads, coming across into Australia through this as a visa type, when they're not getting tested for any skills. They don't have any skills, but they're coming across into the country, being allowed into the country through these visas because someone has a skill in the country, therefore their entire family can come across even though they're unskilled. What are we solving there? We're not solving anything, man. We're creating more demand, more strain on the system. So the world is laughing at Australia. They're laughing. Visa system's an absolute joke, and they're exploiting it. They think it's so easy, and it is easy. It's effortless. Once again, if I was in the shoes of someone overseas and I wanted to come across to Australia, yeah, you know what? It's welcome in. It's an easy process. Criminal record, sure. Come through, mate. You haven't been in jail for more than a year? Perfect. Come on in. You wanna make horseshoes in Australia? Fantastic. Come on in, mate. Come make some horseshoes. Show us your skills. There's a demand for horseshoes. Yeah, any farriers out there, like I'm sorry, but if your market gets flooded with people coming in overseas and starting to make horseshoes, well, you're probably going to lose some work, aren't you? Because it's not, in my opinion at least, it's not an in-demand thing. It's not a critical thing. Sorry, farriers, but your job is not critical to keep the country running. Sure, there's probably demand out of the farms and stuff like that, but it shouldn't allow immigration to come through. Teach your sons, teach your neighbours how to make horseshoes. Keep the family business running. But it's such a rort. But it's just such a rort right now that's happening with it all. And, I can't be angry at people coming across exploiting the system because not their fault. The government has made this process, made this system so effortless, so easy that anyone can come across to Australia. So temporary migration visas, they're the ones that need to be cut down. Not permanent residency visas, which the government's spruiking on about, saying we're going to cut permanent residency down. No, we have 2.5 million people on temporary visas in our rentals, buying up real estate. They're allowed to. Australian Financial Investment Review Board says that if you come across here on one of these visa types, yeah, you can buy real estate. That's fine. Buy a house. Get a mortgage for a home. Do it. Sit around and tell us that you are on a 4-year online-only certificate in carpentry, Cert 3 in carpentry for 4 years. Tell us that, and it's online only, you never go to any practical skills assessment. Tell us that, tell us how that makes sense, and then go drive Uber Eats for 60 hours a week. Tell us how that's solving our building crisis in Australia when these rorts are allowed to happen from the government. So the government needs to be checking on this kind of stuff. They need to be cracking down on the amount that we're letting through. We need to have some common sense around this, guys. The system is under strain. We're in a housing crisis. People are living in tents. There's 120 million, no, million, God, imagine that. No, there's 120,000 homeless people in Australia right now in a housing crisis, and we're letting 2.5 million people come through on temporary working visas, filling up housing, filling up everything, putting more strain, cost of living going up because the system's under strain, energy going up because the system is under strain. It needs to stop. We need to have common sense. It's not permanent residency visas that's causing the problem right now. It is temporary visas. Government needs to start talking about cutting down temporary visas. They don't want to because GDP drops. So the interest from the Australian government is not for the people. It is not right now for reducing strain on Australia. It is so they don't look bad as the political party who allowed GDP to fall to negatives and declare a recession. All they care about is their votes for the next election. That's all government is doing right now, both parties as well. They just do not want to come in and end up in a recession. It's a rot, guys. Our government is playing us for fools, absolute fools, and our country's under strain. We need to change it. I'm fed up with it. Once again, guys, it is not the immigrants' fault. It is the process from our government that allowed them to come through in such numbers. Sure, have a small temporary visa program. Have a small permanent residency program, which we already have. Okay? Don't allow 2.5 million people to come in. It's ridiculous. All right, guys, that's my thoughts for today on this one. What are your thoughts? Leave them down below.